So I have my friend Asheeliyah here today, and she is one of Radiant Rebirth's guest teachers. And she's also a very good friend of mine. And every time I sit down with you, I just really reflect on our unique meeting and how we came to know one another. And one of the themes that is coming up for me that I want to talk about today, as well as unleashing Shakti, is this whisper that I've been hearing that keeps saying, the women around you awaken what's within you. And because of the nature of the work that you do, and also the way that what you've awakened in me, meeting you 4 or 5 years ago now, I can't remember how long it's been, and the power of group ceremony and women's work and women's ceremonies. So for those of you new here who don't know Asheeliyah, she is a woman of many trades and skills. And she essentially, her work is with Shakti energy, and she has something called the Shakti Sisterhood dance ritual ceremony extraordinaire, which I've had the pleasure of sitting in on many times and enjoying and learning and experiencing. And it really activated something deep within me that was dormant, that needed that like arousal and that love and that instigation. And really from the moment that I started doing that work with you, so many big shifts in my life started happening. So Asheeliyah is also a body worker, like literally the best masseuse I've ever worked with. What else do you do, Mama? You do so many things. A dance facilitator, and she's an artist, she's a singer, she's a dancer, she does a lot of beautiful, magical things.
It's Shakti.
It's all Shakti. Yes.
Creation.
The perfect lead into this conversation. So maybe let's start there and talk a little bit about, for those who don't know what Shakti is, let's start with what is Shakti?
So I would describe Shakti energy. I mean, coming from the Vedic tradition, Shakti is the feminine force. It's that divine primordial energy, that creative life force energy. It's also known as the Kali Durga, and many names. So it's this force of creation and destruction. Kali Ma, her energy is invoked, and Pele Ma here on the island is invoked. I mean, these fiery forces are what I envision in my mind's eye when I see the image of Shakti. I see fire. I see new earth being created and new projects being birthed. And so essentially, it's really just igniting a deeper sense of soul mission and purpose. So Shakti is just creation, ultimately at the root. And it's something that, it's divine feminine force, but it's not only designated for women, right? Shakti is within all of us. And Shiva and Shakti are the energies that ride together. And so it's also speaking to Shakti is the Kundalini life force energy that stirs from the base of the spine all the way up through the energy system, through the chakras, and links us from the heavens, embodying into the body, down through the heart, and into the earth, and linking those two realms together, heaven and earth uniting to create that holy trinity. So, yeah. Shakti's one aspect, right? There's so many things, but I love, I feel like it is also everything, because when we're born unto the earth as a soul, coming into this physical form, that full acceptance of being here on the planet, and that full
integration.
Yeah, the choosing. I am a body, and I'm choosing to be here and to fully embody here is necessary. And so the Shakti work has been, it's literally increasingly becoming more and more of a practice all around the world. I see it. I mean, when I first started Googling Shakti, when I first started holding these ceremonies, because the term Shakti was something I had heard through my yoga years, being an instructor, and studied a little bit, but never really got super deep into it. And when I was downloading the name for the work that I was feeling called to do, I was getting the full vision and transmission of what it was. And I was doing some things on Maui. I was living there, and one of the studio owners basically gave me the name to use. She said, "Hey, will you teach dance classes here?" And I was in my early 20s. I wasn't ready to anchor my energy in yet in that way and show up as a teacher, but I was being invited to do that. I was being invited to share my movement with people and teach them what I was doing. And so they were promoting me as the Sacred Shakti dance teacher. And so that's where the name actually came from. And when I thought about this dance journey, and I was like, what's the name? I was getting Sacred Shakti dance, and I knew that people were using Shakti. It's such a generic term that people are using, and there's like a Shakti dance training that already exists on the planet and things like that. So in my business mind, I was like, I can't use that, but my higher self was just like, but that's just what it is. So just accept that that's what you're working with, and so that's kind of how I started working with that name.
And can you, I want to like swoop back in because I love this concept of Shakti being both creation and destruction, and working with the goddess energy to really like unlock those codes of death and rebirth, which, the immersion of radiant rebirth and really all the work that I do and that you do is this understanding of and the importance of both pieces, that there is death and there is rebirth and there is creation and there is destruction, and one is not better than the other. They're both in deep devotion and unity with one another. And I want to like dive into sort of the death and rebirth template and the codes around that. But I also really want you to share, because I've been in ceremony with you and the work that you do is so powerful. The spaces that you hold are so unique and so clean. Like, you're such a clean space holder. And really, I would love to talk a little bit about like the actual ceremony of Shakti and sort of like what are the pieces that don't exist in our mainstream modern society that you're bringing into these ceremonies, and that ultimately like all of us in this space are weaving together to bring out into the greater wholeness of the global consciousness. So what are those pieces that you feel are missing from that you bring into your ceremonies?
The first thing that comes to my mind is granting permission. It's basically creating a sacred container that's safe, and it's granting permission for people to step into their authentic primal energy and to like embody their highest self in that moment with that as the intention. And then from that place, that's where the transformation happens. And it's also within the container of having the witnessing, right? So there's the sacred witness component that if you go to an ecstatic dance, which a lot of people are familiar with now, it's beautiful, and it's really just, a DJ set, and people are within the container. There's general, rules and bounds around ecstatic dance culture. And, ideally people aren't talking on the dance floor, and there's subtle cues that people pick up on from one another. It's not a place to pick up on people in general, right? To pick up on, love interests, but people do meet in that container because it's very intimate. It's like another form of communication when you're not talking and you're just dancing with one another and dancing with yourself amongst other people. And so I think what I'm bringing is just that additional element of granting the permission to go deeper within the self. And it's also a form of hypnosis, essentially. It's guided, facilitated work, and it's just like any meditation practitioner or yoga teacher. They're speaking, and you can take whatever they're saying with a grain of salt, but ideally and initially you're in your body, you're having your own experience internally, and there's no pressure around it. And I think that's one of the greater things that I uniquely bring within the container too, is to just like have a very unconditionally loving space and oftentimes even being willing to go first and be, the crazy one in the room, right? Be the one to be like, okay, we're gonna scream and we're gonna writhe and we're gonna unravel, and I'm gonna grant you that permission by being the example. And it's very vulnerable, but I'm willing to do it because it's what I'm here to do. And yeah, I think that's one of the main things.
Yeah, and one of the reasons I love your work and I love you, and I, have invited you into spaces with me because part of your medicine is this, you know, this playful inner child maiden energy that, I know you can go so deep, and I know that you're such a deep person, but you can come into this really buoyant, joyful space that I feel like is really missing, especially when you're doing deep work, right? Like that's one thing I remember about being in ceremony with you, and going into these really profound spaces of trance and release and transformation, but also coming into these really lighthearted, silly, open, loving, joyful spaces, these buoyant spaces that we often in our society don't go to. And I'm totally guilty of that because I can be a really intense person and forget to come into that playful nature that's just, like you said, that primal part of us that just wants to roll around in the ground in the grass, or roll down a hill, or jump up and down, or spin around with our arms out, or whatever it is. And so that's one of the reasons I love your work, is the weaving in, and the acceptance of and the integration of the light and the dark, and the heavy and the light, and the child and the sage, and all of these components. It's a big part of my work, is really looking at the archetypes of womanhood and, divine feminine energy and Shakti energy. I mean, there's such a spectrum. Like we can't, one of the things about feminine energy is it can't be defined. It is this always changing, formless, evolutionary, transformative energy. And I want to talk a little bit about that witnessing piece, because this is for me really important for women to hear. It is so healing because I think all of us are fundamentally craving someone to truly see us as we truly are, to respect us for who we truly are, to love us for who we truly are, and not need to change anything in the moment of whatever's coming through us. And for me, this was I've always been gathering in women's groups since I was a teenager, and always been really into women's work. But as I got older, what I found was when you're sitting in a circle or a ceremony of women, and you have all of these reflections sitting across from you, and you have to show up in who you are and what you are, and that's the piece that we're craving most, but it's also the piece that we're most afraid to participate in, is to be seen. It's like we want to be seen, but we're also terrified of being seen. And I know you've worked with so many women and so many ceremonies. What can you speak to around, like you were saying, the art of witnessing and being witnessed, right? Because it's like this exchange that happens where it's both powerful to be in the witness space and also to be deeply witnessed in your experience. Can you speak to that?
Absolutely. Let me just take a little sip of water here. Invitation for everybody to drink some water. Yeah.
Hydrate yourself.
So good. Lemon. Yeah, the sacred witness component is super juicy and absolutely necessary within this work. I know this component so well because for the past 8 to 9 years, I've been working with bodies on a table. I've been teaching yoga classes in a room in group settings, and just learning and navigating the subconscious communication of the body, the undertones, and how the body is always sending feedback and communicating with another person. So when you open up a space for healing between two people, it's a very uniquely different experience that takes place, opposed to just you by yourself.
Mm.
And then that continues to grow and expand geometrically, um, or yeah, for the geometry of it, when you have a third person move into a space or a fourth person. So on a somatic level,
Yeah.
the energetics that are being woven within a container are very strategic. I mean, if you have a group of four women sitting in a room, just imagine you're sitting in a room with four women and you're really dropping in, you're having deep felt, heartfelt conversation, and then say a man walks in, and say, let's say this man is someone that everyone loves and is good friends with. Okay, so there's a general feeling of love and care, but there's still a deep energetic shift that happens when this
Yes.
masculine force walks into a room. He could be a very feminine man that everyone loves and trusts, but there's still something that subtly shifts between the women in the group, and the conversation changes, and the level of sacred witness shifts. How deep are these women willing to go now that this other individual has stepped in? Let's say this man is actually just another woman. So she comes in, and say no one knows who she is, but she's just another feminine force. So now we've shifted the vision here of this woman comes in, we open up the circle, and she sits down. We wouldn't just drop right back into where we were. We would orient our energy and feel her and connect with her on a somatic level. And then the conversation would probably shift. It would be very odd and disregarding if we just like kind of pretended she didn't arrive,
Yeah.
and then just continue to go on the thread that we were in. So there's a lot of dynamics to the sacred witness of how our somatic bodies respond to one another, and how the energy is given and received within any given situation and dynamic. And so I personally see the sacred witness as an opportunity for channeling. So for me as a facilitator, I love, love, love standing in that role and like proclaiming that space as a facilitator. And I get to pick up on everyone in the room somatically, and then the things that come streaming out of my mouth, I don't know what's going to come out. Any facilitator can say the same, right? You have no idea what's going to come streaming through. And it's so invigorating when we open our channel up to be that receiver, to be that transmitter, to be that emitter, and send ripples of energy out, and with the intentions being laid amongst the group dynamic for healing. Now that's another component. If it was just to come together and party, and we just want to party. There's no real intentions being set other than we just want to party. We just want to play. And that's incredibly healing already too. Take the factor of bridging prayer work and invocation of our ancestors, our guides, our angels, elemental spirits that are here to serve us in a benevolent way. So now that's really shifting the game, because now we've got sacred witness of unseen forces too. So there's a lot of dynamics at play with sacred witness, like who's the witnesser, who's being witnessed, like, and to be able to hold a neutrality within your being as a witnesser, as someone who's just maybe sitting back. So we'll do various different practices, and you've played with this with us in Journeys, we'll branch off into pairs, and we'll take turns, and I consider this surrogate healing work, where your surrogate is when you're channeling the source of another person through your body vessel to heal and to be in service of healing for them. So we heard the term surrogate mother, right? Someone who serves as a surrogate mother. So it's similar, working in the realms of energy. I'm a surrogate. I'm say I want to channel Alexis, so I'm channeling you, and so you're the one that's, we have maybe a moment of conversation, kind of dropping in a little bit, but not a lot is shared. I'm just going to tune in with you somatically, and then I'm gonna move my body and express through my tones for you, with the intention of supporting as a healing vehicle. And that on a somatic level is extremely powerful. I mean, so many tears are shed in these practices, because there's a deep sense of being felt, because I'm legitimately morphing my field with your field. And there's an agreement field between us on that, right? There's like this is what we're doing. We're both saying yes to this practice. And so, all of our bases are laid for a safe space for healing.
So beautiful. And There was something that, hang on, I just lost it. For those who don't know, I just want to like come back to this. For those who don't know what invocation is, can you just speak to, you know, what you mean when you say invoking outside forces?
Mm-hmm. So invoking is also like calling on, invoking. I invoke the power within me. I invoke um, my higher self. It's like a proclamation, essentially.
Yeah, and it's like I mean, in for me, like if we're putting it in layman's terms, it's like calling in. Like we're calling in,
Yeah.
right? We're inviting something, invoking, inviting something to come into the space to be with us, right? It's like a sacred calling in. Hey, Chels.
Yeah, Chelsea.
So can we, you know, I'm so deeply moved by the work that you do and have so much respect for the work that you do. And I, you know, it's my intention for more women to feel comfortable in these spaces, because there is a level of transparency that has to happen when you enter these spaces, right? And even within my group immersion, even within Radiant Rebirth, there is a contract, like you said, right, where we're all agreeing to be in this ceremony together and to witness each other and to be witnessed. And it's not a forcing yourself to do something before you're ready, but it's also an honoring of like, I am now acknowledging that I'm bringing these women into my field. I'm bringing these energies into my field. I'm connecting with these people, with these women. And, you know, can you speak to the breakthroughs? Because I feel like, you know, even in some of your workshops I've been in, you'll take people to their edge without not necessarily in an aggressive way of like forcing someone to do something, but there's definitely an edge that, you know, we're always meeting. And it's like this, you know, what I constantly hear from women is I don't know how to dance. I can't just dance. I can't just show up and dance. I can't just show up and sing. I can't just show up and do whatever, right? I can't twerk my body. I can't make funny noises. I can't scream. So can you talk about like what has caused us as women to come into a space of oppression and suppression around these things that are so natural, right? Because, you know, I was speaking to another woman the other day, and we were talking about how we are animals. Like, we're animals. And we've forgotten that, yes, while we have a certain level of evolution or consciousness, like, we are animals and we are not in touch with our primal nature. So, for you and the work that you do, why is it important for us to come back into a primal state where we're, you know, when I think of primal, I think of like deep instinctual feelings. It's like what that little kid does before they think about what they're doing, right? They stomp their feet, they throw themselves in the ground, they hug a tree, they make friends with an imaginary friend, like all these things that are just instinctual and primal. So how, as grown women, like how as adult women who have experienced, first of all, there's a layer of trauma, right? Which trauma can keep us from feeling safe in our bodies to be able to do this work. But also, there's also the level of like conditioning and what we've learned and how we've learned to be in our body, or what to believe about our body. So how can we start that journey as adult women to reclaim that and move beyond our resistance of being seen in that? Because it is tender. It is tender to be behaving and embodying your primal nature when most of your life you didn't do that. And the time when you did do that, you don't remember because it was like 7 and younger, right?
Okay. There's so many, like, few things, words that are coming up. Invitation and entrainment. So there's the invitation, which is really key for any human being, right? Man or woman. The invitation is set, and someone can invite you into something, and you have the free will to choose whether or not you want to step into whatever it is that they're inviting you to do. So for me, within that layer of invitation, there's also the power and potency of getting people into a hypnotic state, which is dropping them essentially from the mind down into the body, the heart, the womb, and just completely dropping out of the mind. So once they're in their body, they are more likely to just allow themselves to be in that unwinding, that primal space, that childlike essence. All of those components absolutely come through when you're safe and you drop into your body. So this is where the edge is met, because a lot of people are scared to let go of the mind and let go of the constructs that they hold on to. It keeps us, you know, people are living in a disassociated space on the daily. So when we invite them into their body, and this is, you know, this is why yoga instructors and massage therapists, you know, that's their dharma and their work. They love it because they get to experience someone stepping into the room, and initially before they get there, you can see they're not in their bodies, they're disgruntled, they're stressed, and then after you're done with them, they leave the space just like so enlivened and ecstatic. And so it's like, it's actually so simple, and ultimately it is a choice to drop into the mind and the heart, or sorry, drop out of the mind into the heart. The entrainment component is also that other added layer, and that's where the transmission comes through really strong. And that's why I felt like, wow, my work is way more deeply felt in person, because, you know, when I'm moving my body, like I noticed this way before I started holding these events and these ceremonies. I'd be on a dance floor, just totally going into my flow and just feeling my body and just so deeply in it. And I've been an athlete and a dancer my whole life. So it's like, for me, dropping into my body has always been, and I still have a lot of work to do. We all do, you know, to be more fully embodied. But, you know, I feel comfortable letting go and just getting in there and just really like just being in that space. And I'll look behind me and I'll see like 3, 4, 6, 7 people literally mirroring my movements. And so I noticed that was a pattern, and I thought, well, there's something to that. That's interesting. You know, men and women on an ecstatic dance floor, I'll turn around and actually people would be looking at me and then they'd look away. Like they're kind of like, oh shoot, I'm like fully in her field. I'm in her energy. I'm literally monkey mirroring her. And I would feel that behind me. That's why I'd turn around, like I feel energy behind me, and I'd see all these people like mirroring and mimicking, and I thought, well, there's something to that. So my work absolutely is this. It's like, because it just naturally happens. And so to be able to know the power and potency of entrainment, which is when you entrain with another person, you're basically monkey mirroring them. You're aligning with their frequency, you're aligning with their energy in such a way that you're basically serving as a surrogate in that moment. And a lot of people do this with each other. You know, if there's someone that you're mentoring under, or there's something that you want to learn from them, you just follow their lead, and and it doesn't really feel comfortable because it's not fully you and your energy. It's you're integrating their energy, and you're integrating their codes into your system.
Yes.
So we're always doing this. We are morphogenic beings, whether or not we're aware of this or not. This is happening all the time. Did I answer your question?
Kind of.
I get.
No, I mean, I think this conversation is happening at multi levels.
Yeah. It's
I'm highly aware of, you know, women's fear of being seen in their primal nature, and, you know, and my own resistance. And I've done so much work, you know, to get beyond my resistance and meet my fears and blow past them. But there's always still a new layer level of resistance that still comes up the more that you get to a new edge and a new edge and a new edge. And so, you know, I guess my point is, how can we inspire and support more women in coming back to this space? Because I think because of the conditioning that they'll be judged, right? Because that's sort of what's been shown to them, right? Especially, you know, there's the whole sister wound, right? Like, we could even go into that reality, because that's definitely something you and I have had many conversations about. And we've had a few past rodeos together, past lifetimes together. And I feel like I know you so well on a level that even the years of our friendship and our weaving together is not really even, how can we meet each other in this space and understand that what we're doing is, like, for me, what's really interesting and what motivates me is when I do this work, I know it's creating ripples into the greater web. And you know, maybe we can dive a little bit into the sister wound and how this work actually supports healing that sister wound, because you know, we've all had some form of like bullying or judgment or female shaming or slut shaming or whatever kind of shaming we've had, menstrual shaming. And that's also because we as younger women or young ladies or teenagers weren't initiated into our womanhood. And this is the conversation I keep having like over and over and over again with all of you guys in relating it back to your work, is like, what happens when we don't get initiated into our womanhood and where we are operating from a place of woundedness and not able to relate to one another. And if a woman is in her empowered womanhood, in her, you know, fully expressed, fully embodied womanhood, how that affects women who aren't. And how do we start creating, you know, the bridges to support one another through that process, while also understanding and being compassionate that like so few of us got that initiation. So we can't blame ourselves or shame ourselves for not feeling fully embodied and deeply expressed when we never were initiated into our womanhood. If anything, we were conditioned to believe that it was problematic, it was dirty, it was uncomfortable, it was miserable, it was weak, it was blah, 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 blah. You know what I mean?
It's so important for us to cultivate compassion. You know, it's like, if, and not just compassion for others, but truly, ultimately, forgiveness and compassion for the self. And I know, like, a lot of the terminology that comes out of me, it feels, it could be perceived as super vague and so general in the spiritual terminology, but I'm just speaking what's actually coming through. This is like, these teachings have been coming through teachers, spiritual teachers, over the years, because they're the truths. And unless you embody these truths within your own experience, will you really truly know. And it's not like a one moment or one time moment where you integrate the truth of like, I am you, you are me. There's always layers of understanding that on deeper levels every step as you go into this work, as you do the deeper healing. So it's like the unconditional love, the compassion for the self, the compassion for the other. Like you said, like some sisters are, it's so deep, the trauma runs so deep, and the wounding has, you know, it goes beyond this lifetime. But regardless of how far and wide it goes, like we must just hold like a neutral energy in order to really hold space for the healing to happen, and trust that the healing will happen at its own time, you know, that it's not something that can be controlled. And that is the embodiment of the feminine, just relinquishing all control and fully surrendering to that transformation, that death and rebirth. And when I think of the death and the rebirth, the transformation, I see it in my mind's eye, I feel it in my body as this like lotus unfolding continuously, and it never stops. You know, the transformation keeps going, whether or not I'm present to it or not. I am growing, I am evolving, I'm ever changing. And you and I are, there is actually truly no separation between us, that we are of the same thread. And you carry magnificent traits that I desire and love, and I the same for you. And so then if we can just fully drop into our hearts with one another in a container where we can actually feel one another's beauty as if it were our own, that's where mass healing takes place. It's incredible what happens within these containers when you actually can support a group of women in dropping into a unified field. A unified field is when the sisters are legitimately picking up on the same exact thoughts. A group of women having the same thought drop in. It's all in the cloud, and we're all so synced up that we're like mirroring each other's movements, and saying the same thing, having the same realizations. It's all swirling in the field, and we're all getting it at the same moment. It's not like, you know, like someone's that's where, like, I love this, because even though I've been called to like step into my leadership more and serve as a facilitator and stand in my power and give myself that permission, right, to be in that role, I am continuously learning in every moment, and I'm receiving information from the women in the group. And the only way that I can do what I'm doing is because of the container. You know, if no one was in the room, then we wouldn't have it. We wouldn't have a ceremony on our hands if I was the only. I mean, I could have my own ceremony, but I love being in group setting. I love seeing what comes through, what kind of creation wants to, this new earth, like downloads from the mother, all these new codes streamlining in that moment through a group setting is next level work. And it's what we need. We need to learn these tools of how to unify group settings. I mean, I could take this work and integrate it into corporate businesses. I could take this work and integrate it into the world. And this is part of my intention, is to, like, how do we bring this medicine out so that the whole world gets it? You know, it's not, oh, I came up with this is mine. It's we, the collective, the unity consciousness.
Mm-hmm.
I love our conversations because I feel like I just feel like you meet me on so many levels, Alexis. Thank you.
Yeah. And I love what you said about, like, it's because we begin to unify our fields and our beauty becomes shared, it transcends or dissolves this belief in separation, that she has what I want, and so because she has what I want, I can't like her, or I'm not good enough to be around her, or you know, whatever sister wound story comes up. And so this work really is about, like, seeing yourself in everyone and letting everyone see themselves in you. And there's something very vulnerable about that. And for me, vulnerability is such an important piece. And, you know, Brene Brown talks a lot about how vulnerability is the birth ground for innovation. So when we're in this exposed state, and we can be, and not exposed in a way that makes us weak or susceptible to being hurt, right? We have this connotation that vulnerability means we're this, like, little puppy or this little animal who's injured, who can't help themselves. Vulnerability on some level is just being exposed in the now moment, in what you're in the now moment, right? Like, not pretending, not hiding, you know, whatever expression wants to move through you is moving through you, as long as it's not something that's, you know, actively harming somebody else. That there's a vulnerability in being what you are and who you are in every moment. And again, it's like a practice, like you said, it's a practice of devotion. And we don't get to this place of there not being a new layer, but it's all a practice, like yoga or whatever, meditation. It's a practice that we show up for again and again and again. And to me, doing this work, I really, like, I have to remove the part of my ego, myself, my personality as Alexis, and move into a higher version of the feminine spirit that wants to activate and ignite and awaken other feminine beings, and not let my ego and my personality get in the way of that, even when I feel exposed, even when I feel vulnerable. And even as a facilitator, we can feel vulnerable, we can feel exposed, we can feel fear, we can feel, you know, all kinds of things come up when we're in a collective space. Whether you're the participant or the facilitator, there's always going to be this, like you said, this shared field. And for me, it just keeps coming back to this idea, this concept, this need for empathy to be woven into the fabric of everything. Because really, essentially, what we're talking about is empathy. We're talking about being able to feel one another and not close ourselves off. And to me, when that happens, we amplify healing. We amplify unification. We amplify love. We amplify compassion. We amplify forgiveness. We amplify all of courage, right? When we decide to allow ourselves to feel one another, right? And there's a difference between that, you know, feeling one another and then, like, taking on somebody's stuff, right? Like, there's a boundary that has to be in place, where you understand that while we are one within this embodied form, in this body on this planet, it's not my job to take on all this person's shadows and stuff and, you know, projections and ego and all the stories that they have, but that there's still a way to connect and relate that doesn't require you to take that on for them, but does allow you to access them, in a pure state, in a pure way. Do you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Absolutely. And that's really key for anyone that feels called to hold this sort of space for others, or to be a mentor or a teacher or, you know, a therapist. It's one of the greatest lessons. Or to even just be a lover or a mother or a friend. I mean, honestly, it translates into every area and aspect of life and relationship. You know, not taking on other people's stuff. And there again, it's an experiential journey to really learn, and then to be able to implement tools of like just proclaiming your energy, your space, learning how to ground yourself just enough to get into, okay, recognizing what's mine from yours. And if I'm feeling something that I know isn't mine, that I'm able to proclaim my energy again, and release whatever it is that I've been maybe perhaps taking on, and also be able to identify, well, what part of me is somehow taking that on, like what part of me is resonating. Eckhart Tolle talks about this being the pain body. You know, we attract that of which is reflective of what we're experiencing internally. And so being able to be humble enough to access what that is, and what part of us is magnetizing those energies, and then to address it from within, to be able to transmute it from within. And then at that point, it's like we become so strong in our energy. We become so fortified. Did you say fortified?
I got you, boo.
That, you know, nothing can touch this, right? It's like we're so held within our own empowered state.
Yeah. I want to be aware of time. Are you okay on time, Asheeliyah?
I have 5 minutes.
Okay. You always like to take it to like the edge of time. That's what I love about you. You just like create time from nothing. You're like, oh yeah, I've got time. Actually, I was supposed to be there like 30 minutes ago. Okay, well, you know, in wrapping up this conversation and just sort of, you know, summarizing this space, Asheeliyah is going to be joining into Radiant Rebirth ceremony, 4-month ceremony, and teaching about embodiment. And, you know, it's always a bit of a surprise. Like, we don't overplan the space. It's really like what Asheeliyah was saying, where, you know, we tune into the group and the energy and orientate and calibrate ourselves to what is. But is there any like final words that you would love to share about, you know, beginning the journey of unleashing Shakti? Like, what can be, you know, I hate this, like, what's the first step? Because, you know, that's a kind of a loaded question, but, you know, where can someone begin this journey of feeling safe enough to begin unleashing the Shakti and this divine feminine energy within them when they haven't lived that way, you know?
Well, I'm getting 2 words: pleasure and fear. It could be one of 2 pathways, depending, you know, or and lots of pathways. But let's just speak to these 2 of pleasure and fear, and we'll just maybe put the fear in the bracket of pain. Pleasure and pain. This is the edge that we're riding.
Yes.
This path of transformation, the death and the rebirth is one and the same. The pleasure and the pain is one and the same. And it's the bridging of worlds. And so accessing those parts of you that experience both. So, you know, accessing those parts of you that are so fearful that, but you know that you must, because there's something inside of you that gets a rush from it too. So there's maybe just a process of maybe tuning into the things that scare the fuck out of you, or tuning into the thing that brings you the most ecstatic pleasure, and maybe seeing into that a little bit more of like what within that pleasure do I fear? What within that fear do I desire? And just kind of seeing where your mind and your body takes you.
Yeah, and I think what I'm hearing from you is this concept of learning how to hold multiple things,
Mm-hmm.
and learning how to be multiple things, because as that is the feminine, right? It's like there's always this multifaceted energy of the feminine, and so, you know, not trying to define yourself by one aspect of who you are, like meeting the pain, seeing that pain, but also acknowledging that that's not who you are, and acknowledging that there's other aspects of you that are pleasure and joy and bliss and love and compassion. And yes, you're experiencing these other aspects, but how can we come into a space of really holding multiple things? For me, that's a big turn on, because for me that's the integration of, you know, earth and sky, heaven and earth coming together. And like, that's all the women that are teaching in this space with me are all women I've brought in specifically because they hold the codes of this integration of both worlds. Because I'm not interested in elevating out of my body, ascending out of my body, and not having a lived embodied experience that's full of all that comes with a lived embodied experience, and just bypassing bypassing the fact that God has given me a body. Because God has given me a body, I know that this body is sacred. So why am I trying to leave my body? And that's really what I heard you say in so many words, is, you know, the embracing of the multitude of things that we are, the multiverse that we are, and not over identifying with anything, just riding the wave, that feminine wave that is up and down and up and down, and just keep riding it. And there's pain and then there's pleasure, and that's part of the embodied experience, and that's part of the fear of coming into the body, is that we have to acknowledge that there's pain that's here. And so if we leave the body, we disassociate from the body, then we can pretend like it's not. But coming into the body is what brings us into confrontation with our pain, but also with our gifts and our power and our medicine and our joy and our primal nature and our empathy and all these other yummy things.
And it's helpful to know that on the other side of that really excruciatingly uncomfortable exploration, as you're moving through the eye of the needle, there is extreme ecstatic pleasure on the other side. And I mean, you know, the goal is to not try and control that being your end result. The full surrender is a must. So basically fully surrender into the pain and actually embrace it, and just like get curious. Curiosity. That's like another really key. Just get really curious. And there it is again with the play. Be curious, explore, you know, tap into the inner child, the innocence aspects, so that you can fully go into it to then come out the other side. Yeah, it's just transformation game.
Yay! Death and rebirth codes. Yay. Well, yes. Thank you, Asheeliyah. I wish I could just talk to you all morning, but I know you have to run, so I want to honor your time. Thanks for hopping in, for transmitting your medicine and your beauty, giving us a little space to be with you today. It's always a pleasure, and I'm really excited for you to be expanding on your medicine and sharing with us, you know, your gifts around living a fully embodied life within Radiant Rebirth. And I know the women in this round are just going to be blown away by your gifts, and I can't wait for them to feel that.
Mahalo, sister. Always such a pleasure. I love you so much. Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. I'm going to stay on here, so you just hop off whenever you're ready.
Okay.
Thank
Aloha.
you. Yeah, love you. Ciao.
Love you.